All right, everybody, thank you very much for joining today. We're going to get the ball rolling with this month's market update, and we have a lot of things to go over. We're going to be chatting about the market for houses and for condos right now, touch on what we're seeing on the ground as we're moving into the fall market. We're going to be talking about the election platform kind of presented by the three main parties for the upcoming election as they relate to housing. Urmi Desai, our editor at MoveSmart, is going to be joining us. And then I'm going to touch on how housing affordability has changed significantly under Justin Trudeau. So again, as kind of like usual, if you have any questions, please feel free to post them in the chat. Sydney from our office is with us, and she'll be answering or sort of asking your questions for you. This webinar, we may be posting probably up online on YouTube just to get some of this information out to people. We don't normally post our webinars online, so this one will probably post on YouTube just to get some of this election content out. For anyone who watches it on YouTube after, you can sign up to join our webinars. We have a private one like this one for our clients and a public one we also do each week. So I'm just going to jump into sort of the latest numbers. We're going to kind of touch on them at a high level, starting with sort of the high level stats for houses. So the red line is sort of the current trend of the number of sales for houses in the GTA for August. And we can kind of see that sales are down significantly over last year. That trend is going to continue till the end of the year because last year we had this really big increase in sales because of COVID. So, for the next year, sales are basically going to be down quite a bit. And I think that's, but there's still, the interesting trend is that they're still well above previous year's sales volume. So, if we kind of draw a line here, we're probably going to see sales sort of in this price range, likely still up from last year, but well below, above sort of the previous years, and well below last year. Now, the big challenge is when we look at the number of new listings are not only well below last year, but well below previous years in 2018 and 2019 pre-COVID. And, a lot of this we're finding is it's just people, if they can, they don't want to sell their home. There's a lot of different factors. But certainly, I mean, one of the big factors impacting the housing market now are sellers aren't selling. We have, very few new listings hitting the market, well below historical trends. I mean, in August, there's 5,900 new listings. Historically, we typically see closer to 8,000. So that's a huge problem. So this is the new listings coming on the market. When we think about sort of the active number of homes for sale, this is kind of where we see sort of these massive issues right now. I mean, in August, 4,000 homes available for sale, when in the pre-COVID period, we would have anywhere from 11 to 13,000 homes for sale. So the big challenge right now is there's not a lot of homes to choose from. I mean, and we're down significantly even compared to last year. And I think that's going to be the big challenge as we move into this fall market, that our starting point, if we think about inventory, is unbelievably low, right? So for inventory to pick up, we need new listings to accelerate. We need demand to slow down. It's a slow process. And I think this is going to be one of the challenging things. And when we look at sort of the inventory levels right now, as in the first couple of weeks of September, they're not much better. I think we're still under 5,000 actual homes available for sale, which again is still well below the historical trends. So that's what's looking like on the ground for inventory and for listings. Now, when we look at the months of inventory, this again is this balance between supply and demand. How many homes, or how long would it take for all the existing inventory to sell, assuming no more homes came on the market? And we're still under 1 month. This is an unbelievably competitive market. When prices were quite sluggish and prices were falling, sort of that was this period back here when we had 3.5 to 4 months of inventory. After the market kind of peaked in 2017, that was a slow market, and then since then we've had this big decline in the number of homes or the months of inventory, which has pushed home prices up higher. Again, this one spike here is during the initial lockdowns of COVID, which is why inventory accelerated because people stopped buying homes. But that was really a short-term trend. Now, despite that, we're seeing, a slight decline or pickup, slight decline from the peak, but a bit of a pickup in the number of homes selling for over asking. This is another good metric that kind of gives us the pulse of the market. How competitive is it? Because even though we have 1 month of inventory, which is what we've had probably since the beginning of the year, the market is a little cooler today than what it was 4 months ago. And we can see that with fewer homes selling for over asking, more homes just being listed, taking offers anytime, not getting bidding wars. And don't get me wrong, the nicest homes in the nicest areas are still unbelievably competitive. They're still getting lots of offers, but depending on the neighborhood and depending on the home, some homes aren't getting bidding wars right now. It's a little bit less competitive than it was 4 months ago. And we're going to see how that evolves into the fall market. Our hope is, again, that we see more inventory hit the market, sales kind of stay a little bit balanced, so it's not as fiercely competitive, which is not the type of market we like to see when there's 15, 20 offers on homes. We like to see it a little bit more balanced. And prices have stabilized since pretty much the beginning of the year at around 1.3 million for houses. And again, the trends are a little bit different across the GTA. Some pockets are a little bit more competitive than others. But overall, I'd say we're generally still in a seller's market. So unless we have questions, Sydney, I'm just going to jump right into sort of the update for the condominium market.
We have one question.
Yeah.
So do you think sellers will still hold off in the fall? Could they come back after cottage season?
Yeah, so I think one of the things, and that's a great question. So there have been, we think, a number of things that led to sort of this decline in listings. Part of it is if you didn't need to sell, no one was in a rush to sell in the summer when the economy and everything opened up again. I mean, being in your home to prep it was the last thing anybody wanted to do. So, I mean, we've even had clients who delayed their listings till September. So we do expect to see listings pick up as we move into the fall market. The question is going to be, is it going to be enough to kind of add to the inventory and keep up with the sales volume that we're seeing? And that's kind of what we don't know, but definitely we expect to see inventory to pick up as we move into the fall market. Touching on the condo market. So the condo market's interesting, still a very busy market, but we can kind of see not quite as insane as the market for low-rise houses. So again, in red here, we have number of sales, which is very similar to last year's sales volumes, slightly ahead of 2018 and 2019 volumes. So a busy market, but not quite as strong as the market for houses. And similarly here, when we look at inventory, so the number of new listings are down quite a bit from last year. I mean, and we have to keep in mind, last year we saw this surge in listings for condominiums because of people moving out of the city, because of people buying out of the city, selling their condominiums, investors worried about rents declining, listing them for lease. So we had this big spike in new listings. So we're going to be down compared to last year. But the key thing is that we're still above, historical trends. So new listings volumes still relatively strong. And then when we look at sort of the inventory levels, so the active number of condo listings on the market in August, again, we're still close to historical norms. We're still above 2019, slightly below 2018. So the issues that we're seeing in the low-rise market, where the number of homes available for sale is way below historical norms, is not what we're seeing in the condominium market, right? So condominium market is a little bit more stable. It's still competitive. The interesting, I mean, at least from my perspective, someone who analyzes housing markets, I mean, the interesting thing is that I'm finding is that we're not seeing much more upward pressure on prices because, and specifically for houses, if I look back now, and we have a market that has such little inventory and so much demand and under a month of inventory, you would expect to see prices to continue to rise. That's normally what happens. But I feel like the market has hit this ceiling where people just can't go much higher. And this is pretty much why prices have stabilized since the beginning of the year for houses, and we're going to see shortly for condominiums. Months of inventory for condominiums has picked up, so there's more units available for sale relative to several months ago. That's taken a little bit heat out of the market. Again, the number of condos selling for over asking has been declining since the spring market, which is also taking a little bit heat of the market. And again, here, if we look at average sale prices, they've pretty much stabilized as well since the beginning of the year. So again, I think even for condominiums, we're seeing sort of this price ceiling that's kind of putting a little bit of pressure to kind of keep things where they are and not allowing prices to go too much higher. So I don't know if we have any other questions, Sydney, before we kind of move on.
We do. So one question is, what types of condos are the most competitive? Which offer the most value?
You know, it's interesting. I mean, we're seeing a lot of interest in slightly larger units. I mean, if you think about sort of a young couple who want to buy their first home, who cannot afford a house anymore, it's just like not possible. You know, the type of condos these couples are looking for are, of course, 2-bedroom units, you know, and they could be 800 square feet or 850, but something that you can settle into for the longer term. We're finding definitely a lot of strong demand for, because those types of units are effectively a substitute for, you know, buying a 3-bedroom low-rise home, which is no longer available. So we're definitely seeing a lot of demand for those types of units, and a lot of demand for condos, quite frankly, like across the GTA. It's not even downtown. It's, you know, the suburbs are quite busy, so it's generally a pretty competitive market. So now, what's in store for the fall market? So just at a high level, as I said, we're finding things are very competitive still. I mean, it's still tightly supplied. You know, both sales and new listings are down so far in September, which is a trend we expect to see when compared to last year. Last year, new listings and sales were quite high, so we expect that trends to continue. So right now, there are no big changes from the summer. I'd say it's pretty much sort of the same, you know, momentum we've been seeing. We're hoping we're going to see a few more listings to take a little bit of pressure off the market. But again, it's still early. It's only the first. We've only had basically 1 week since Labor Day. So we'll see how things evolve as we move into the end of September. So we're going to move on now to chat about federal elections. Assessing housing policy palooza. Joining us today is Urmi Desai, who is the editor at Move Smartly, and not just the editor. Urmi has a lot of experience with government. She used to be at Finance Canada in Ottawa, has worked on federal budgets, Ministry of Finance in Ontario, so has been sort of in kind of government affairs and working with the government, so knows sort of the finance side. So is here to kind of break down some of the promises being made by politicians on the campaign trail as they relates to housing. So thanks for joining, Urmi.
Great. It's great to be here.
So should we jump right into the sort of the next?
You know, given that we're speaking to our Realosophy clients today, I think overall it's worth mentioning the question that's on some people's minds is whether the elections will impact home prices.
Yeah.
And whether any of the new initiatives, depending on who gets in, will actually do something material to the market. So overall, I've canvassed yourself, other Move Smartly experts, David LaRocque on mortgages, and Bob Aaron on legal matters, as well as been doing a lot of reading. And overall, I feel the assessment from experts is that there probably will not be a material impact on home prices, particularly in the short term, based on the proposals we're seeing so far.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I don't think we're going to see any material impact. If anything, the policies, I think, are kind of potentially might push prices up higher rather than cool the market. But you know, you can kind of unpack some of the policies and some of the things that even our Move Smartly contributors mentioned on that front.
Yes, and there you've touched on, I think, what a lot of experts have consensus around, which is if the number one goal is to do something about housing affordability in Canada, then a lot of the proposals on offer actually appeal to stoking demand in certain types of the segments. So there's concern that actually some of these proposals around mortgage rules or around new tax treatments will actually increase demand and allow more people to expand their budget options and get into the market. Overall, the assessment is that it's housing supply. We need more supply, and that's the big part of the housing affordability issue in Canada. So on that front, we're hearing some bold proposals. As it's important to note that housing this election has been way more notable. Obviously, and I think in our article, in our report, you see that of the G7 countries, Canada has had the highest rise in home prices, the fastest in recent years. So there is a lot of concern around affordability, and all the politicians and parties have been speaking to it. So on the supply side, we hear from the Liberals a proposal to build 1.4 million new homes by 2025-26. Conservatives build 1 million homes in the next 3 years, and the NDP create 500,000 units of quality, affordable housing in the next 10 years. So all of these sound great. Of course, looking at the details, the biggest question is how viable are some of these proposals in doing something new? Obviously, supply has been an issue for a long time. So is there anything in these details that suggests that something, material will happen so that we'll have a lot of supply? So one of the proposals from the Liberals is to really go into, both by committing money and looking at regulations around rent-to-own projects, both bigger projects and also structuring a regulation so that landlords and tenants can enter into these agreements. So that's rent to own is a big push on the Liberal side. On the Conservative side, we have an interesting proposal around community land trusts. So using this idea of donating land to build affordable housing. So people or builders or whoever that might have some of that land may donate it, obviously for preferential treatment in terms of, I assume the incentives would be tax or otherwise. So that's another one that stood out. Other ones are, things we've heard before. Looking at unused office spaces, looking at, interestingly enough, a lot of all three parties are looking at the federal housing stock to see if that can be released for more use, as the federal government actually does own a lot of properties itself. And again, proposals around startup funds to partner with communities so that they can build projects that are meeting the needs of various communities. So those proposals aren't that unusual. I'm wondering what you think about the first two I mentioned, the rent to own and the some of the community land trust ideas.
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge with all of these proposals is the federal government doesn't build houses. They're not responsible for building. They can only sort of create programs that are designed to incent building, incent landlords to do something, incent investors to do something. So again, these are very long-term solutions. Some are better than others, but again, these are just, basically policies put out hoping that something comes of it, not knowing if it's actually going to materialize or if the investment community is going to, obviously want to absorb it. Now, the one positive thing we've seen on the supply side is a big increase in supply of purpose-built rentals, partly under the Liberals' national housing strategy, which is great. And I think in one of our few next reports or webinars, I'm going to talk about that because I don't think people realize that housing starts in Canada right now are at a 40-year high. Like, we haven't seen this level of housing starts since the 1970s. So there are positive things on the supply side. The challenge is all the supply coming on the market, or the bulk of the supply, are condos and apartment buildings. We're not building a lot of low-rise homes. And we're kind of seeing that in the data, in the resale data, why housing and low-rise homes are so competitive right now.
Great. And in our article, we also touch on your comments that, demand side, large demand side policies that we don't usually connect with housing, such as immigration and other things, we really need to start seeing politicians link these up if we're to calibrate supply and demand a little bit better. So I think that's something that we're also going to be tracking at Move Smartly a little bit more closely.
Nice. So we move on to buyer protection?
Yeah, so the Liberals have proposed a number of buyer protection proposals. I think the most interesting of them is the banning blind bidding. So the way that right now home buyers make offers without knowing what the other buyers are offering on a home. Overall, in speaking to Bob Aarons, so the proposal would be a national action plan to have all the provinces and regulatory bodies come together to ensure buyer protection. Interestingly, some of the proposals around realtor disclosure, house sale history, right to inspection, they are in place in Ontario. And in speaking to Bob Aaron, our legal expert, I think this is the issue. The issue is that, again, this is a federal jurisdiction issue. It is very
provincial jurisdiction.
It's a provincial jurisdiction issue. While the federal government routinely does try to convene the provinces and achieve standardization in a number of areas, it's not clear how effective this would be. It would require all the provinces to come on board. So again, not very clear how much impact this would make. Now, the blind bidding, any thoughts on that? Because I know that was a hot topic that you were.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think more transparency is better. But again, I agree with Bob that this is a provincial issue. I don't think the Real Estate Council of Ontario wants to make any changes to that. So I don't see that changing anytime soon.
So the next issue is first-time buyers. And here the Liberals have proposed some changes to their existing home buyer incentive program. Initially introduced, I believe, last year, it was the proposal the government would own some equity in your house. Now they're adding the option to actually pay that back as a loan when you sell. There's a proposal for a tax-free first home savings account for up to $40K for under 40, and doubling of the first-time buyer's credit to $10K. Now, as someone who did use my own RRSP funds under a previous program to do a down payment on a home, as an individual, some of these proposals sound good, like the tax-free home savings account. But in speaking to experts, again, it's this issue of stoking demand in one area of the market, which may, again, make housing affordability an issue. So the more you allow people to get into the market, the more people get in, then those first-time buyers find the prices start running away from them again.
Yeah.
So there is a bit of a chicken and egg feeling around these proposals.
Yeah.
On the mortgages side, one of the eye-catching one was the Liberal proposal to defer mortgages up to 6 months, or for a borrower to be able to request that of their banks or lenders. Our mortgage expert, David LaRocque, had doubts about this proposal. It could really, the fear is, introduce costs as mortgage lenders and banks try to deal with some of the uncertainty about getting their returns by increasing costs for the rest of borrowers as a whole. So there was concerns around that. The Conservative proposal to introduce a 7 to 10 year mortgage to reduce stress test exposure. This is the way that you have to qualify, and by meeting certain tests, your ability to pay back a mortgage at different interest rates. And the idea is by introducing these 7 to 10 year mortgages, you wouldn't face those tests as often. Another point that Dave actually has long agreed with is to eliminate the stress test for renewal with another lender, because that actually keeps us a little bit tied to our lenders, and probably is not competition enhancing. The NDP has a proposal for a 30-year term for mortgages for entry level homes for first-time buyers. So I think, again, John, along with the Liberal proposal to increase the amount of mortgage insurance for people who have down payments below a certain amount, to be able to afford homes up to $1.25 million, along with these other proposals for 30-year terms, 7 to 10-year terms, there's two issues. One, as David LaRocque pointed out, a lot of this is in the details. There's a lot of regulation that governments can introduce that tends to go wrong. Bob Aaron has also noted that a lot of policies in the real estate market, for example, have been introduced and then had to be fine-tuned because of this issue of not implementing them in such a way to avoid unintended consequences. So that's one big concern. The other concern is fueling demand again. I mean, a lot of these proposals will mean more people can get into the market. So yes, you could technically afford more, but again, does that make prices climb? So you're again chasing.
Yeah, exactly. That's the challenge. I think when you try to stimulate the market with more debt, I mean, it's going to help maybe those first round of buyers because they could borrow more. But within a few months, any benefits of that are just gone because prices will have accelerated. So again, not the best solution, but these are politically popular because for the average person, it sounds like it's going to help them get into the market.
Now, buyer speculation, again, this concern that foreign buyers who have probably incomes that are larger or capital at their disposal that's more than the average Canadian has, have fueled in this concern that they've fueled home prices beyond the average incomes of Canadians. So we see all three parties proposing to do something about this. So banning foreign money or banning foreign investors not living in or moving to Canada for 2 years. Mm-hmm. We see from the Liberals and Conservatives. And from the NDP, it's a 20% tax on foreign buyers who aren't citizens and permanent residences rather than a ban. Mm-hmm. So your thoughts on this, these measures?
I mean, listen, I think these have become issues these have been issues for a long time. I think the reality is the way the market is right now, I don't think these are going to have a material impact on the market. At the end of the day, the big issue is more foreign capital rather than foreign buyers. And by that, I mean like the percentage of people who have no ties to Canada, who are just, buying properties is quite small. Most people are taking money that has been earned overseas in low tax jurisdictions and kind of flowing it through family members who might live here. So it's not so much that the people themselves are foreign, it's more that the capital is foreign and it's earned overseas in these low tax jurisdictions. But a lot of this harm has already been done, quite frankly. I mean, house prices in Toronto and Vancouver have exploded. So I think these are probably not going to have as big of an impact. To be frank with you, a lot of the investors in Canada are domestic more so than foreign even. And they probably would have been better off kind of clamping down credit on even domestic investment rather than foreign investment if they wanted to have a bit of an impact.
Yes, and you're touching on something that we're going to be looking at on Move Smartly in the future. Canada, Australia, New Zealand, for example, attract a lot of foreign students. Our education market is a huge contributor to GDP. And so this idea that, a lot of the people purchasing properties and not having a connection to Canada it's a little bit tenuous a claim. I think many do have some ties to the country, and it has caused prices in those three countries because of the attractiveness of our lifestyle and these products like education and other things to increase when it comes to demand and home ownership. There was a controversy around the anti-flipping tax that the Liberals were proposing on residential properties. I believe you've been interviewed to talk about it, and the Conservative claim that this is an attempt to tax capital gains on our primary residences. Yeah,
that's a bit misleading. I mean, it's the idea is that they're taxing anybody who flips a home within a year, but they specifically said that anyone who's selling because of life changes, death, divorce, or whatever, would not be taxed, or just taxing investors. I personally don't think it's a great policy. I know a lot of people think that, assume that these flippers are the problem. I don't think they are. At the end of the day, they're building homes, they're making additions, they're renovating homes, they're investing, in jobs. And in most cases, they're buying homes that the average first-time home buyer is not interested in or can't afford to renovate. That's the other part. Like the average home buyer can't buy a home and spend $150,000 to renovate. So, these people are basically taking homes, fixing them up, and at least kind of bringing in more livable supply. So I don't think it's a great policy, but again, I think it's a popular one from the Liberals.
And a few more tax measures. I think we've already discussed, touched upon most of them. The Conservatives saying they will not introduce a tax on capital gains. So we see that concern of theirs again. The concern with most of these proposals, again, is the stoking of demand for certain segments of the market. So again, first-time buyers, home buyers, tax credits, things like that will, again, be beneficial to individuals, but for the market as a whole, does it contribute to prices, again, running away from everyone? One interesting proposal from the Conservatives is the idea to defer capital gains tax on those selling and reinvesting in rental properties. And the idea presumably here is to increase the number of rentals that are available to people. But I wonder what you think about this, because while it sounds okay on the surface, there is concern of landlords owning multiple properties. We've actually even heard of bigger companies coming in and owning many, many properties. And what it might mean if it becomes even more attractive to hold these kind of properties.
Yeah, I had a chat with a journalist from the Star who was fact checking this, because the Liberals were making it sound like this is just a big tax benefit for investors. And here's the key thing. If this tax deferral, and the idea with it is that if I'm an investor and I own an apartment building and I sell it, I mean, normally I have to pay capital gains on my rental property. What the Conservatives are saying is if you invest in another rental property, you can defer those capital gains. Now, my feeling is if this policy was strictly focused on deferral, if I'm building new rental property, I think that's a fantastic policy, because it's contributing or trying to give a tax incentive to what we want, which is more supply. But when they make it about buying just any other rental property, well, it's not a great policy, because all this is going to encourage is effectively institutional investors buying properties that are rental properties that are quote unquote underperforming, or rents are below market, effectively renovate them, jack up the rents, and then sell them with a big profit in 2 to 3 years. It's effectively the institutional investor version of property flipping, right? And this is going on right now. I mean, you can't stop it. I mean, I don't think it's all evil, because they're investing capital. They want to, they're basically fixing up buildings. But I don't think we need to give a tax incentive for that type of behavior. I think we do need to give a tax incentive for building more homes, not for flipping rental buildings.
Again, the unintended consequences rather than malintent is an issue that keeps coming up with a lot of these proposals. And finally, just touching on renting, I think we touched upon rent to own. I don't know if actually we got your thoughts on that, this idea of rent to own, and committing the Liberal proposal to commit money to projects that would allow more rent to own, and also create a structure that would enable more rent to own agreements between landlords.
Yeah, I mean, I don't love it as much as some of these proposals by the Conservatives around community, like something that makes renting a better option long term as opposed to rent to own. I just many of the rent to own programs I've seen are usually not great for renters. And it's hard to encourage landlords to do it. If the Liberals make it sound like they're going to be able to encourage condo investors to charge a reduced rent into this rent to own scheme, which is very optimistic. So I don't like that program as well. I think it's better to be investing in affordable rentals that people can rent in long term on a more permanent basis. I think is better.
And on that note, you touch upon the Liberals you spoke on this. They have overseen the largest increase in purpose-built rentals over the time that they've been in office. Conservatives would like to presumably keep that momentum going by encouraging foreign investment in purpose-built rentals. So again, emphasis on that. And purpose-built rentals for viewers are buildings that are not condos that are bought by owners and then rented out to people, but actual buildings in which everyone is renting. And these are normally owned by larger companies. I think companies from Europe. There's some active Canadian companies as well. So that's I think a trend that we're seeing, and obviously a lot of progress has been made there. The NDP, in addition to the immediate COVID-19 rent relief proposal, had some additional interesting announcements around trying to tighten up against rent eviction. So, again, I think the concern here is NDP is a federal party. Most of this falls under provincial jurisdictions. In Ontario, for example, rent evictions, that's when you ask a tenant to leave, renovate it, and then try to get a higher rent, is discouraged. It is not allowed under the rental regulations, but it's hard to catch. So I think the NDP proposal was tied to having people who renovate their units declare the value change of those units in their tax returns or something like this, so that they can tighten up enforcement. So again, how well that would tie up to something that's a provincially jurisdiction issue is not clear, but some innovation there.
Yeah, for sure.
Some innovative ideas.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining, Urmi. If we don't have any other questions, thanks for kind of pulling all of these different policy proposals together for us, and for joining us today.
Pleasure. It's good to see housing at least become a seriously discussed issue. I think the one thing that has to come out of this election, no matter what happens, is a sustained focus, and that's what we're hearing from all Canadians, buyers. Everybody would like to see a sustained focus and some concentration in this area.
Yeah. Awesome. Very good. All right. Right now, I'm going to jump into my last section, talking about how housing affordability has run away under Trudeau. And I think this really highlights why affordability is such a big issue right now. So what I did is I compared sort of house prices under Harper versus under Trudeau. For Trudeau, kind of the end of term I used was sort of prices in July 2021. That was sort of the most recent year we had. So we can kind of see how home prices have changed under Harper's term. House prices were, just above sort of that 300,000, 350 range to just under 600,000 during his term. Whereas under Trudeau, they've really exploded. And this is GTA benchmark home prices. They were under 600,000 at the beginning of his term and are over 1 million now. Now, I think what this masks is the fact that Harper was in power a lot longer. So when we kind of convert this to an annual appreciation, house prices were rising about 6% per year under Harper, around 11% per year under Trudeau. But, again, I think when we're looking at buying homes, I mean, the annual percentages are one thing, but we're more concerned about the dollars as home buyers. So when we sort of break down how much home prices have been appreciating annually in dollar terms, we see this unbelievable difference between the two. I mean, under Harper, home prices were rising about $25,000 per year. And under Justin Trudeau's government in the GTA, they've been rising by over 80,000 per year. And I think this is really the challenge that we're seeing on the ground now, that people's incomes haven't kept up to these rapidly accelerating home prices. So if we actually do some basic math and figure out, okay, well, how much do people's incomes need to increase by to keep up with the rate of appreciation of home prices? Under Harper, it was $25,000, dollar appreciation in houses versus 80. If we sort of look at the math, the people's annual incomes needed to increase by about $5,000 households under Harper, whereas under Trudeau, your household income needs to be rising by $16,000 per year just to keep up with house prices. And of course, most households are not seeing their incomes rise by $16,000 per year, which is why every year that has passed, people could afford less and less because house prices were significantly outpacing income growth. And I think this is sort of the challenge that we're seeing in the market right now, where households earning good, low $100,000 income, have six-figure down payments, can't afford a house anywhere in the GTA for their family. And I think this is really kind of touches on sort of the affordability challenges that we're seeing right now, and why affordability is such a huge topic in this federal election. So that is all for today's webinar. I don't know if we have any additional questions.
Yeah, we have just one.
Yeah.
So what do you think the biggest driver of prices over this period?
Oh,
what do you think is the biggest driver? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say 100% it has been population growth. I mean, our population really exploded under Justin Trudeau's government after 2015. I think in the past, like under Harper's government, I think annual immigration targets were, I think, around 250 or 270 or something like that. and under Trudeau, they're around 400,000. And, you know, really what happens when your population is really accelerating and growing at a faster rate than you can build homes, I mean, you're just going to have higher home prices. I mean, that's really, I'd say, the number one factor that has pushed home. If you look at the change under Harper and Trudeau, that has probably been the biggest factor, because credit has tightened under Justin Trudeau. I mean, we've had these stress tests that have put in. So it's not like there's more money out there. There are just way more people chasing fewer homes, right? And I think that's one of the challenges right now, that all parties want to keep immigration at these really high levels without really caring about the fact that we don't have enough homes to house these people. And it's really just pushing home prices higher. And I think that's the one challenge that we're finding right now. Any other questions?
Yeah, so what needs to be done to increase supply? What can the feds do if this is a municipality issue?
Yeah, so I mean, there are definitely things that the feds can do. So as we talked about, like at the federal level, the federal government's job really for supply is indirect, right? They introduce tax incentives, tax credits, cheaper financing to encourage more supply. And this is effectively what has happened under the National Housing Strategy. The federal government has made money way more available and quite cheap, actually, for people or developers who wants to build rental housing, right? So this has encouraged a wave of new rental housing being built, and our rental housing under construction is the highest level it's ever been, or it's been at least since the 70s, I'd say. The challenge is, you know, again, what type of supply are we building? When we look at supply, right now it's largely condominiums and purpose-built rental, not as many houses. So to the question, definitely there are things that can be done on the municipal side. And the biggest thing is the fact that the majority of Toronto, for example, I mean, the city of Toronto for sure, and even the 905, you know, you can't take a detached home and split it and build two semis. You know, the zoning does not permit it. And a lot of the city of Toronto and the GTA homes, it does not permit semi-detached homes. They have to be single-family detached. And a lot of, you know, what people are pushing for is relaxing some of these zoning requirements to allow more dense housing. I mean, one of the funny things about the Liberals platform, they had this tax incentive for what they call multi-generational homes. So again, this idea that, you know, and we're seeing this even on the ground with a lot of our clients who have aging parents. They don't want their parents to be on their own. They don't want them to care for them. They want them to be in their home, but they obviously don't want to live together. So they want to build 2-unit homes. Maybe their parents in one flat and then the family in the other. This is like a multi-generational home. The problem, of course, is that in most of the city of Toronto, you're not allowed to build multi-generational homes. Like the zoning just doesn't permit multi-unit housing aside from basement apartments, which is not a proper multi-generational home. A multi-generational home is like a duplex, 2 proper separate units. So again, encouraging zoning to allow, you know, multi-unit houses, you know, splitting detached lots to semi-detached lots, those types of policies would definitely help the supply side, and it'll I think it would be significant because it wouldn't necessarily rely on just big builders. You know, I have a lot of smaller builders now who could take small lots, split them into 2, build 2 decent sized family sized semis. That would help the supply a lot. But again, these are things on the municipal side and the provincial side, and the challenge is a lot of municipal politicians don't want to do this because the people who live in these detached communities only want detached homes. They don't want more people on their streets. They don't want more cars on their streets. And I think this is a challenge. The barriers to supply in North America are political. Everyone knows what needs to be done. It's just a political problem. The councillors want to get reelected, so they don't want to be advocating for more density because their constituents don't want more density. Right? And I think that's the key problem right now that we're seeing on the supply side. Awesome. If we have any other questions.
That's it.
That's it? Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining today. We'll obviously be keeping our client monthly seminars going. Obviously to talk about all the on-the-ground issues that we're seeing in the housing market, especially as we move into the fall market. So thank you again so much for joining us today, and we'll regroup next month.